UB, which is my employer, but then also at Kaleida, at Hopman Woodward, at Roswell Park. We see all kinds of invention disclosures. Those numbers are growing, and the number of programs that we have in place to support those disclosures and turn them into companies, that number is growing left and right.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be listening. This is Latitude, the 43 North podcast. I'm your host, Nate Benson, Digital Media Manager here at 43 North. Thank you so much for listening. And hey, what I would really appreciate before you listen to this episode is maybe pause it, go over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review, because this is a 5-star episode, because I got a 5-star guest with me this week. Look at that. That's great transitioning right here, Tom. Thomas Murdock from the Western New York Incubator Network. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me, Nate.
What's going on?
Not too much. Easing back into the week after Thanksgiving and doing lots of good work with our companies across Western New York as they get ready to wrap up the year and head into 2018.
Now, this airs actually closer to Christmas, so you've been on Thanksgiving break for 3 weeks now?
Wow. Yeah, it took 3 weeks for Thanksgiving, and it's a great place to be.
I know you well, but for those who don't, why don't you give us a little rundown of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm another guy who grew up in Buffalo and had these ambitions to work in economic development. Some kids want to be firemen or baseball players, and I knew that I always wanted to be an economic development person here in Western New York.
Who was your economic idol on your wall as a kid?
So my family jokes that the moment that ruined me was when I saw my grandpa at a baseball game knowing Jimmy Griffin. Jimmy Griffin knew him, and they shook hands, and that was a big moment in my life.
There you go. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do over at WIN.
Sure. So the first thing that's important to say is that I'm an employee at UB, where I look after a program called WIN, Western New York Incubator Network. And WIN is really made possible through the statewide Innovation Hotspots program, which we are one of 10 innovation hotspots across the state. And we're really the Western New York node in that program. And essentially what that does is looks at building collaborative networks of business incubators across New York State, getting them working together to make sure that there's no duplication in programming, and looking at what's needed for really to support our entrepreneurs the best we can.
So how are we doing?
We're doing pretty well. So we've been at it for 3 years. Just added up the numbers for our first 3 years of operations and have seen some really good progress, helped companies raise almost $20 million in outside money and create about 100 jobs. So it's really exciting to see.
Jobs and money are always a good thing.
Jobs and money are a good thing.
So what are the types of things, Nate's not just in, the recurring theme here on the podcast, I need innovation space, or I need, why would I come to you guys for incubation?
So generally what we see is companies at their earliest stages are not quite ready for the incubators, but what they are ready for is some of the programs that we look after with a handful of our partners across the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Western New York. So that might be something like Student to Biz, that might be something like our I-Corps program, that might be Startup Weekend. And that really gets these companies starting at their earliest stages and making early progress. So generally, by the time the companies are looking to come into the incubators, they've made some early progress. They might have a couple of sales made. They might have their product ready to go. Because frankly, sometimes incubation represents a cost for them. They're paying rent in an incubator, and they don't want to do that until they know that they're absolutely serious about what they're working on.
So I can go ahead and start applying then, huh?
Yeah. Ready to go with the podcast.
So what types of businesses is the Incubator Network ideal for?
So generally, we see a lot of tech and science-based businesses across our network. We have 10 incubators that are in our consortium across 5 counties in Western New York. We have some incubators like Harrison Place in Niagara County, which focuses on more industrial uses. We have the Incubator Works facility in Alfred, which focuses on ceramics companies. We have Z80, which focuses on software companies. The Fredonia Incubator adds a lot of value for companies in the arts and technology space. So there are a lot of different verticals that we're trying to support all at the same time.
How many businesses have you guys brought through?
So generally, we can count the numbers a number of different ways, and that number changes.
You can get to 4 several different ways.
So you can count the numbers a number of different ways. What we see is across our 10 incubators, at any given time, we have at least 200 companies in those incubators. And the way that I count my numbers is I've got a handful of programs that I run, And being one of those 200, being an incubator client qualifies you for one of the programs that I look after. And we then enroll companies from those incubators in the distinct programs. And so when I count up the numbers, there were 68 companies in 2017 that I've helped in one way or another.
Wow.
That we've helped in one way or another, I should say.
And you guys have a pretty robust kind of program catalog here. You've got, pitch prep, tax incentives, assistance. Kind of walk through everything from a programming standpoint that these startups can take benefit from.
Sure. So when I came into this role, one of the first things that I did was went around and talked to each of our incubator directors and asked them essentially what was on their wish list, what were the things that they wanted to be working on that they didn't have the time to or the money to. And so we had a handful of things that we came back to as essentially our program of work. And so the first thing was actually something that 43 North in its infancy gave rise to. And so the first year in the 43 North competition, no one really knew what to expect. And when we got to the semifinalists, we saw there were, I think the number was 113 semifinalists that year. Mm-hmm. About 30 of those companies were local, and about 20 of the 30 were in our incubators in one form or another. And so all of a sudden we had 20 companies who were all needing to pitch for money in about 2 weeks' time and needed a lot of help to get ready. And so what we did was we put together a suite of events and programs and courses and opportunities for the companies to enhance their pitch. And we ran 20 companies through that program the first year and gave them opportunities to practice their pitch, get feedback, beat it up, give them some experience defending their numbers in real time. So that was a program that we put together. Another item that we saw was that there were oftentimes specific gaps that companies were facing in terms of the expertise that they needed to take some big steps forward. And so we put together a consulting program. We call that our embedded consultants program, where we help companies retain an outside expert to bring some specific depth of knowledge into their company. And we can cost share with them the expense of doing that. We've helped, I think the number is 17 companies do that. We put together a program called Buffalo Student Sandbox, which looked at how do we bring companies into the incubators at their earliest stages. And so we thought there'd be some big potential to work with student entrepreneurs. There were student entrepreneurs who were working on companies throughout the school year, taking advantage of some great programs like eLab and Student to Biz and the various pitch competitions that are out there. But frankly, what we saw was that they were losing steam during the summer when they were working on their summer jobs. Yeah. Reality was setting in. They had to make money. And so we put Sandbox together as a means to help them keep, sustain and grow that momentum during the summer. So that was a program that we put together under the WIN banner and have since transitioned to some other partners. And there are now, I think, 31 different companies that have gone through the Sandbox program. And then last but not least, we're empowered by New York State to run a set of tax incentives for incubator companies at their earliest stages. And we've enrolled, I believe, 21 companies in that program at this point as well.
So you're not busy at all.
Every day is different and fun and fascinating and rewarding. And I get to help people, and I tell folks that I get to use all the different parts of my brain every day.
You mentioned things like pitch prep and kind of that outside mentorship. How important is something like that? Because I think maybe to the outside audience who isn't familiar with the just sheer number of pitches some of these founders do give on a weekly, monthly basis. I mean, it's quite extensive, especially when you're in that kind of raising early stage capital phase of a startup.
Yeah, it's a huge need for them, and it's something we say it's iterative, and they improve every time that they work on it. We had a competition in Albany for technologies that come out of universities across New York State, and UB sent 3 companies to that. 2 of the 3 came back as winners. So there were 5 winners across the state. 2 of the 5 were from UB, so that was a huge win for us. And we had seen those companies half a dozen times before. Sure. And this is not the first time we helped them think through what they want to say and how they want to say it. And so that was a big opportunity, and that's a great example of these companies that keep at it. Another great example of what's happened through that program is also an indicator of some of the value that 43 North brings to the table. So again, if you look back to that first year in the competition, and we've now had 4 years of the competition, we had those 20 companies that we wanted to help get ready for their pitch. And 43 North, I really think the value of 43 North extends beyond the winners in the competition, because we had these 20 companies who are all really motivated to work really hard in a short period of time and get better. And they all got better, even if they weren't winners in 43 North. This is the part where I say everyone's a winner.
Yeah.
And we had one company in particular, worked really hard, made a lot of progress, did not win in 43 North that year. They continued to make progress throughout the year. They got funding through other sources, specifically the federal government's STTR program. And then in year 2 of 43 North, they did become a winner. They walked away with a $500,000 investment. That company is Cytocybernetics. They took that investment from 43 North. They went from being a UB company to being a UB company and a 43 North company. They've set up shop locally. They're hiring people. They're doing well. They're shipping product all over the world. So that's an example of a 43 North company that didn't necessarily get there on the first time, but learned a lot through the process. And there are dozens and dozens more of companies that have worked really hard in 43 North and not walked away with money, but been better for it.
And just so the listeners know, that was not a paid testimonial. That was, he didn't know the question I was going to ask. So, but thank you. That was a very nice description of 43. And Cyto's a fantastic company, like you said, doing great things.
And a female founder.
Yeah, and a female founder, which is always great. You're from what I understand, the tallest member of the startup community here in Western New York.
I have John Gavigan beat by at least
3 feet.
2 inches, yeah.
But you're in the trenches, so to speak, every day. What are some of the hurdles facing startups in Buffalo, Western New York right now? And that's the tough question of the day, putting on my former hat.
The tough question of the day is we've done a lot of good things over the years, and we've taken some enormous steps forward together. And I think the big one right now is that we build companies that are globally relevant. And the way to do that is to build companies that are rooted in customer validation, market feedback. They're built around real needs that real customers have. And when we do that, we're going to be building companies that build relationships in Utah and in Toledo and in Amsterdam and all over the world. And that's really the big need for us, is to step those relationships up. And that's a hard thing to do. It's not a very direct path, but it's something that I see dozens and dozens of people working on.
What are you most optimistic about, going into 2018, especially with, we got new crops of 43 North companies coming in. We've got changes all across the startup scene. What are you most looking forward to?
So I think I've got 3 things that I'm really excited about. Number one is that there's such an uptick in interest in entrepreneurship in Western New York, and people like me have more and more people coming to us every single day saying, I want to start a company and I need your help. And that's exciting. It wasn't always like that. Item number 2 is to see this new crop of 43 North companies arrive. And I think we've seen enormous progress in terms of the kinds of companies that 43 North is bringing in and the kinds of value that you can add for them in the time that they're here. And I know anecdotally I'm seeing, and I don't know what you folks have aggregated, but anecdotally I certainly see more and more of these companies succeeding and wanting to be here long term. And then the third thing that I'm really excited about is a lot of the research that's coming out of the institutions on the medical campus. So UB, which is my employer, but then also at Kaleida, at Hopman Woodward, at Roswell Park. We see all kinds of invention disclosures. Those numbers are growing, and the number of programs that we have in place to support those disclosures and turn them into companies, that number is growing left and right as well. And so I think 2018 we're going to look back at as a year when we really step up our efforts to turn those technologies into big companies too. Small companies and then big companies.
Very big companies, we hope. So in a little bit of a news item from earlier this year, NYSTAR and UB announced they're extending WIN through 2021. That's kind of a double down from for WIN, I should say, by UB. How important is UB in all of this?
Sure. So UB is hugely paramount in everything that we do. And if you look around Western New York, there's probably not another economic anchor as big or as important as UB. I have the great pleasure of being an employee at UB. I'm a part of the extended team of people in business and entrepreneur partnerships that look after partnering with companies and supporting our entrepreneurs and commercializing the technology that comes out of the university. So earlier this year, we were able to renew the funding that WIN operates under. When I first came to UB, it was under a 3-year agreement that NYSTAR would fund the WIN program, and we're able to renew that for 5 years. And so that is a big and exciting thing that allows us to plan for the longer term, to think about what programs we want to put in place and when. And really what it all comes back to is NYSTAR seeing UB as a strong performer in the technology-based economic development space, knowing that UB is a good partner to have and wanting to invest smartly in programs at UB. NYSTAR is a significant funding agency for us at UB, and our work is not possible without their support. We do that with our CAT program, with the WIN program, with the centers. We have 2 centers of excellence, one in life sciences and one in materials informatics.
How important, you look at startup ecosystems, and I'll use Pittsburgh as an example, 15, 20 years ago, really partnered heavily with universities to start capitalizing on their IP that was being developed there. And now look at Pittsburgh. It's becoming kind of a hub for very specific types of industries.
Google and driverless cars
exactly.
and everything,
How much more of that do we need to do so that in another 5-10 years, UB and the startup ecosystem here in Buffalo have created, something that's unrecognizable right now. We couldn't even define it if we wanted to.
It's a long path, and I think we're on it, and we need to keep at it. It's funny that you mentioned Pittsburgh specifically. At UB, we were doing our strategic planning for our economic development plan this year. And I actually had the pleasure of interviewing some teams in the commercialization departments at Carnegie Mellon and was learning what's worked for them. And essentially, they made these bets 40 years ago. And so they're now seeing the fruits of those investments that they made 40 years ago. So hopefully it won't take us that long. But they made the point that they were the first school to get a computer in every student's hands. And so 40 years ago, that was the thing. And then you ask them, what is the equivalent of that in 2017? What are you doing now? And now it's a matter of getting every student to be intimately involved with robotics. And so the technology's changed, but the concept for them has remained that they need to be innovative, they need to be pushing these things on the leading edge and embracing change, frankly. And so we're now doing those things too. So like I said, we're on the path, and I think we have a lot of good things ahead of us.
If people want to get more connected with the startup scene, either through UB, through WIN, through other avenues, how should they do so? Because we always hear here at 43 North, I want to participate, and that doesn't always mean, thinking of a company to at the 11th hour apply to 43 North. There's other ways locally you can
do that too.
Yeah, you can do that too. That's fine.
So I think there are a lot of good ways, and there's a group of 24 people who have the great pleasure to work with early stage companies in Western New York. And I consider myself really, really lucky to get to be one of those people. And some of us are at UB, some of us are at 43 North, some of us are all kinds of different places. And what that means is that we have the opportunity to work together. And I think that extended group, we do work well together. And we joke, at least one of my colleagues and I joke around that the ecosystem can be confusing to someone on the front end. And what you need to do is find your Sherpa person. Yeah. And so if you find Tom Ulbrich in another arm of UB, or if you find John Spitz at Z80 Labs, or if you find Jack McGowan at Insight Consulting, they will all sit down with you. Any one of us will give you an hour of our time to sit down and brainstorm and hopefully give you some things to work on and find where the best matches are for you. And then we'll start to make those introductions, and that happens all the time.
All right. Well, we will check in with you further down the road next year, and we'll see how things are going around Western New York.
Great. Well, thank you, Nate.
Talk to you soon.
All right.